Most people think Everest kills you at the summit. That is the comforting myth. It allows the danger to feel distant, concentrated in a single dramatic moment at the top of the world. One step too far, one mistake, one fatal photograph. But Everest does not work that way. The mountain rarely kills climbers where the view is wide and the air is thin enough to steal your breath in seconds. It kills them slowly, methodically, in places that look almost ordinary on a map, on gentle slopes, in camps that feel familiar. On the way down, when the hardest decision has already been made, and the body has already spent more than it can afford. This story is not about heroism at 29,000 feet. It is about what happens after the summit photo is taken. It is about the long, quiet unraveling that begins when climbers believe the danger is behind them. Everest is deceptive. From a distance, it appears still, peaceful, almost respectful. But every section of the standard route from base camp to the South Col and beyond has taken lives. Doctors, Sherpa guides, world-class alpinists, people who trained for years, planned meticulously, and still never came home. In this episode of Ben Stories, we are going to move step by step along that route, not to dramatize it, not to glorify it, but to understand it. To understand why the mountain's deadliest moments are rarely loudened, why survival on Everest is decided long before anyone reaches the top. Because on Everest, the summit is not the finish line. It is the point where the bill finally comes due. And once it does, the mountain is not interested in excuses. Every Everest expedition begins with optimism, whether climbers admit it or not. By the time they reach base camp, they have already survived months, sometimes years of preparation, paperwork, sponsorships, training, the belief that if you are careful enough, disciplined enough, the mountain will allow you passage. Base camp sits at roughly 17,600 feet. On paper, it sounds extreme. In reality, it feels almost manageable. There are heated tents, hot meals, satellite phones. Conversations drift from weather forecasts to summit windows, from oxygen flow rates to stories from past seasons. It feels temporary, controlled, safe enough. That illusion has killed people. Base camp is built on the Kumbu glacier, a massive, slow-moving river of ice. It shifts beneath your feet every hour of every day. Cracks open without warning. Tents lean where they stood straight the night before. Most climbers know this intellectually. Very few feel it until something goes wrong. In 2015, the ground shook. A massive earthquake rippled through Nepal, and within seconds, the slopes above base camp released an avalanche that no one could outrun. It tore through the camp like a moving wall, crushing tents, equipment, and people alike. 19 died. Among them was Dr. Marissa Eve Girawang, a physician who had come not to climb, but to help others survive the mountain. Her presence at base camp had been meant to reduce risk. It didn't matter. Everest does not distinguish between ambition and intention. Beyond base camp lies the first true gatekeeper, the Khumbu Icefall. On maps, it is a short section. In reality, it is the most feared part of the climb, a frozen maze of collapsing towers, shifting blocks, and crevasses deep enough to swallow buildings. The ice here is alive. It groans, it fractures, it moves when the sun warms it, and shatters when the cold tightens its grip. Climbers cross it in darkness, usually before dawn, because cold slows the ice slightly. Aluminum ladders are lashed together and placed across yawning gaps. Fixed ropes guide movement, but they do not guarantee safety. A misstep, a snapped rung, a shifting anchor, any of it can be fatal. Experience offers no immunity here. In 2014, a Soraka massive block of ice collapsed without warning. 16 Sherpa climbers were killed instantly. These were not novices. These were the strongest, most capable people on the mountain. Men who crossed the icefall dozens of times each season so others could chase the summit once. There was no mistake, no bad judgment, just timing. Survive the icefall, and you reach Camp 1, around 20,000 feet. The terrain flattens. The noise fades. For the first time, some climbers feel relief. They shouldn't. This is where altitude begins to negotiate terms. Sleep becomes shallow, appetites disappear, judgment dulls quietly. Some climbers arrive here and realize their bodies will not adapt, others feel it too but convince themselves it will pass. It often does not. People collapse at Camp 1, People fall into hidden crevasses they never saw. Not dramatically, not heroically. They simply fail, one system at a time, while the mountain watches in silence. Everest does not rush. It waits. Above Camp 1, the route funnels into a wide, frozen basin known as the Western Khumbu. From a distance, it looks almost welcoming. The slope is gradual, the snow is smooth. Sunlight reflects off the surrounding walls of ice, trapping warmth in a way that feels unnatural at this altitude. Some climbers describe it as walking through a high-altitude greenhouse. That warmth is a lie. The Western Khumbu sits at roughly 21,000 feet, where Camp 2 is established. Here, the air is thin enough that the body begins consuming itself just to function. Muscles weaken, reaction times slow, small decisions take longer. The body is no longer repairing damage, it is rationing survival. Most deaths at Camp 2 do not involve falls or avalanches. They are quieter, more disturbing. Altitude sickness does not announce itself dramatically. It arrives as a headache, a tight chest, a sense that something is off. Some climbers listen to that signal and turn back. Others do not. And Everest has a long memory for those who ignore early warnings. There are documented cases of strong, experienced climbers reaching Camp 2, feeling chest pain or confusion, and making the correct decision to descend only to collapse somewhere between camps. Not because they pushed upward, but because their bodies had already crossed a threshold that no rope or guide could reverse. Above Camp 2 rises the lhotse face, a massive wall of ice that transforms the climb from endurance to exposure. The angle steepens, movement slows. Every step is clipped into a fixed rope. You are no longer walking so much as hauling yourself upward. Camp 3 sits at approximately 24,000 feet, carved directly into the lhotse face. The tents here are not placed, they are anchored. You sleep attached to the mountain, because rolling in your sleep could send you sliding hundreds of feet down the ice. There is no margin for error, none. This is where climbers enter what is often called the pre-death zone. The body is failing, but not yet beyond rescue. Mistakes here are less forgiving, falls are longer, recovery is harder, and weather changes begin to matter in ways they didn't below. Climbers have slipped here. Some have survived the fall. Many have not. Ice avalanches sweep sections of the face without warning. They do not roar. They simply appear, erase, and vanish. Above Camp 3, there's no ambiguity left. At roughly 26,000 feet, climbers reach Camp 4, the South Col. This is the death zone. Above this altitude, the human body is dying even while resting. Cells break down faster than they can be repaired. Judgment deteriorates, vision narrows, time loses meaning. The South Col is not beautiful. It is exposed, wind-scoured, littered with remnants from past season-storm tents, broken oxygen bottles, equipment abandoned by people who never returned for it. It is the last place where climbers pause before attempting the summit. Most only stay a few hours. Oxygen systems are checked. Weather is reassessed. Some climbers already know they will not go higher, but the descent from here is dangerous in its own right. Others convince themselves they have just enough left. History suggests that just enough is often a lie. David Sharp, a British climber, collapsed near this altitude after attempting a summit without supplemental oxygen. Other climbers passed him, assuming he was already dead. He was not, but at this height, recognition does not guarantee rescue. He died where he fell. Frances Arsentive reached the summit, but ran out of oxygen on the descent. She spent the night exposed in the death zone. By morning, there was nothing anyone could do. At Camp 4, the reality becomes unavoidable. Above this point, survival is no longer shared. It is personal. The summit push begins in darkness. Most climbers leave the South Col around midnight, their headlamps forming a slow, uneven line of light moving upward into blackness. The cold at this hour is absolute, -40 degrees or lower, before wind is factored in. Every exposed inch of skin is a liability. Every pause costs heat, oxygen, and clarity. From here on, movement becomes mechanical. Step, breathe, clip, unclip, repeat. The first landmark is the balcony, a small, sloping platform where climbers can briefly adjust oxygen and look out over the Himalayas as dawn approaches. For some, it is the first time they realize how little strength they have left. For others, it is where oxygen systems begin to fail, regulators freezing, masks leaking, flow rates misjudged in the dark. None of these problems feel catastrophic in the moment. That is what makes them dangerous. Above the balcony lies the south summit, a false promise at roughly 28,700 feet. The terrain narrows. The ridge drops away on both sides, thousands of feet into nothing. A single stumble here is not recoverable. Fixed ropes provide guidance, not security. If the rope fails or if a climber loses the strength to hold it, the mountain decides the outcome. On crowded days, movement slows to a crawl. Traffic jams form along the ridge, sometimes lasting hours. Climbers stand still, burning through oxygen they cannot replace. Fingers numb, toes lose feeling. The brain begins making small compromises. Just a few more minutes, just one more step. Some climbers collapse while still ascending. Others reach the summit and realize, too late, that they no longer have enough oxygen or strength to get down. The summit itself is small, unremarkable, a narrow crest of snow and rock with no protection from the wind. Photos are taken quickly. Radios crackle with brief congratulations. There is no celebration. There cannot be, because the summit is not the goal. It is the midpoint. The descent begins almost immediately, and this is where Everest takes most of its dead. Muscles that barely carried climbers upward now must control each step downward. Coordination deteriorates. Judgment fades. The same obstacles that felt manageable hours earlier now feel hostile. Fixed ropes are missed. Anchors are clipped incorrectly. Feet slide where they should grip. Rob Hall, one of the most experienced Everest guides in history, reached the summit in 1996 after guiding clients successfully for years. On the descent, a storm moved in faster than predicted. Whiteout conditions erased the route. Oxygen ran low. He became stranded near the south summit, unable to descend. From that ridge, he made a satellite phone call to his pregnant wife. It was not a dramatic call. It was calm, practical, final. He did not survive the night. This is the pattern Everest repeats, season after season. Not recklessness, but depletion. Not panic, but delay. Climbers who would survive almost anywhere else in the world die here because the margin for recovery has vanished. Above 26,000 feet, rescue is nearly impossible. Helicopters cannot operate reliably. Other climbers are barely capable of saving themselves. If someone falls, collapses, or simply sits down and cannot stand again, they remain where they are. Body recovery at this altitude is rare, dangerous, often fatal to those attempting it. So the mountain keeps them. They become landmarks, silent markers along the route. Evidence not of failure, but of how thin the line between success and death truly is. And still, the line of headlamps keeps moving. By the time climbers descend back toward the South Col, many are no longer fully aware of their condition. Oxygen levels drop. The brain, deprived and exhausted, begins to misinterpret reality. Simple tasks feel abstract. Time stretches, then compresses. Some climbers believe they are moving quickly when they are barely moving at all. This is where Everest becomes most unforgiving, not because the terrain is worse, but because the climber is. Small errors accumulate. A glove is removed for too long, and frostbite sets in. A carabiner is clipped incorrectly. A rope is stepped over instead of clipped into. None of these mistakes would be fatal at lower altitude. Here, they compound. Some climbers reach Camp 4 and collapse immediately, too depleted to continue downward. Others attempt to rest, believing sleep will restore them. It will not. At this altitude, rest does not heal. It accelerates decline. Bodies cool. Oxygen deprivation deepens. Edema develops quietly in the lungs or brain. High-altitude cerebral edema does not look dramatic at first. Confusion, poor coordination, irrational decisions. Climbers may insist they are fine while barely able to stand. High-altitude pulmonary edema fills the lungs with fluid, making each breath less effective than the last. Victims drown slowly, in air. Descent is the only treatment, but descent requires strength many no longer have. Some climbers are found sitting upright, attached to the rope, as if resting. Others are discovered just off the route, having stepped aside to let someone pass and never rejoined the line. In the death zone, sitting down is often a final decision. Even below Camp 4, danger does not ease. Fatigue follows climbers into the lhotse face, where a single misstep can send them sliding uncontrollably. Fixed lines are relied upon completely, yet they are only as strong as the anchors buried in ice that is constantly changing. Below Camp 3, oxygen systems are usually depleted or abandoned. The body, already damaged, must now function on its own. Reaction times are slow. Vision is blurred. Balance is unreliable. Falls here are common. Survival is not. Those who reach camp too often believe they are safe. Many are not. The western Khumbu, with its deceptive warmth, becomes an oven during daylight. Snow bridges soften, crevasses open wider, dehydration deepens. Some climbers die here after surviving the summit, the descent from the South Col, and the lhotse face, not from storms, not from avalanches, but from cumulative failure, the price of every decision made higher up. Eventually, the Khumbu Icefall must be crossed again. By now, ladders have shifted. Ropes have been reset. Ice that held days earlier no longer exists. Climbers move through it slower, weaker, less attentive. This is where survivors sometimes watch others disappear. A slip, a ladder tipping, a block of ice breaking free. The icefall does not grant second chances. Those who fall into its depths are rarely recovered. And then, for the few who make it through, base camp reappears. Tents, voices, the sound of life. It feels unreal, almost undeserved. Many climbers describe this moment not as triumph, but as confusion. The mountain releases them without ceremony, no closure, no explanation, just absence of those who did not return. Everest does not announce who it will keep. It simply waits for you to find out. When people talk about Everest, they often speak in absolutes. The tallest, the coldest, the most dangerous. Numbers make the mountain easier to understand. Death tolls, elevation, wind speed, oxygen percentage. But Everest is not an equation. It is a sequence of decisions made under pressure, while the body is quietly failing. No single step kills most climbers. No single mistake explains most deaths. What ends lives on Everest is accumulation. Fatigue layered on fatigue, confidence built on early success, warnings ignored because they arrive too gently. The belief that experience, strength, or good intentions somehow earn protection. They do not. The mountain does not care if you are a guide or a client, a doctor or a Sherpa, a first-timer or a veteran of multiple summits. Above a certain height, everyone is reduced to the same fragile system: lungs struggling to work, a brain starved of oxygen, muscles burning faster than they can recover. That is why the summit is such a dangerous illusion. Standing on top of Everest feels like victory. In reality, it is the moment when survival becomes most uncertain. Everything that kept you alive on the way up has been spent, and now, you must retrace the most dangerous sections of the mountain with less strength, less oxygen, and less margin than ever before. Many climbers die knowing they succeeded. Their photos exist. Their GPS tracks confirm it. Their names appear in summit lists. And yet, they never came home. So the lesson Everest teaches is not about ambition. It is about restraint. About recognizing that the mountain does not reward effort, it punishes overcommitment. On Everest, reaching the summit is optional. Coming back alive is not. If this story stayed with you, you'll find more like it here on Ben Story's quiet, honest accounts of survival, loss, and the decisions that stand between the two.